This is part 4 of my recap on my instant death ability is so overpowered you can watch the previous parts with the link in the description below at the end of the last episode. This anime opens with Len, who at that time was curious about Yogiri's powers. Len also wanted to know what things Yogiri couldn't do. At that time, Len asked Euphemia for all the information. The one thing that made Len most curious was that he wanted to know whether Yogiri was also able to kill him. The scene then shifts to Yojiri and Danora in the city center. They are still confused about why the city center is suddenly filled with zombies. But on the other hand, we are shown a man named Ryota, who at that time protested to Masayuki because previously another sage had given the authority of this city to Ryota. Because of this, Ryota felt annoyed because Masayuki was doing whatever he wanted in his city. Ryota then asked Masayuki to withdraw his undead troops from the city. However, when Masayuki said that this was an order from Len, at that time, he was really surprised that Masayuki even asked for the key to the city. After getting the key, Masayuki then immediately stopped the movement of the zombies and let broadcasts appear throughout the place to explain to the remaining humans. Masayuki explained to them to look for figures named Yogiri and Danora. He asked them to bring those two people. Otherwise, Masayuki would mobilize the zombies again to attack local residents. Ryota, who saw this, all felt annoyed, because all this time he had had difficulty developing the city of Hanabusa, but instead everything was destroyed this easily. Yogiri and Danora were at that time being sought by everyone, even though Danora and Yogiri at that time didn't know why they were being sought like this. But Yogiri thought it was probably because he had previously killed a sage. Suddenly they were surrounded by residents in that place. Yogiri had previously warned them. If they wanted to kill and make things difficult for Yogiri, he would immediately kill them on the spot. But they still didn't pay attention to Yogiri's words, because at that time they came with the intention of killing. Yogiri then immediately killed one of the residents.
より厄介かも。たち追われてるわけ。
まあ、賢者を殺しちゃったしな。これはこれで面倒だな。いたぞー！うわっ！殺すな！がない！急げ！俺がやってやる！つもりで近づいてくるのに、ってけしかけてきているのか。あいつと直接交渉できるのか。
But at that time, Yogiri began to feel annoyed with Masayuki and intended to meet him in the town square. Not long after, Yogiri then came to Masayuki and asked him why he was looking for them. Masayuki, who saw their presence, felt annoyed because he thought they were sacrificing themselves for the other residents. However, the reason Yogiri came to that place was because he wanted to kill Masayuki. At that time, Masayuki ordered his undead troops to immediately arrest Yogiri and Danora, and at that time they all immediately moved towards Yogiri. Initially, Masayuki thought that it was impossible for Yogiri to kill a dead figure, but not long after that, as usual, all the figures he summoned died instantly. Seeing that, Masayuki felt very surprised and annoyed with Yogiri. Then Yogiri explained to Masayuki that he could determine their life and death. So if they can still move, it means they will be considered alive, but if they remain still, they will be considered dead. So the concept of death and life does not apply to Yogiri. However, Masayuki, who saw that, still didn't believe that instant death magic really existed, and therefore he immediately intended to enter combat mode. But when Yogiri told him to die, Masayuki immediately fell on that spot. After that, Yogiri talked to Ryota about many things. Ryota also explained to Yogiri that it seemed like a sage named Len was targeting the two of them. Even at that place, Mokomoko and Yogiri were starting to feel something was wrong. It seemed like someone was watching them from a distance, and strangely, Yogiri suddenly felt extraordinary killing intent from the residents in that place. When Ryota wanted to stop all of that, he still didn't. He then came to the conclusion that it seemed like Len was controlling everyone inside the barrier, and it turned out that it was true that from a distance he could see Len controlling everything, accompanied by Euphemia, who was there. At that time, Len asked Euphemia how high her strength really was. In your opinion, Euphemia at that time answered that it was possible that Yogiri was above a sage. Euphemia even told Len not to deal with Yogiri because it would be very dangerous even though Len was a sage. But at that time, Len was still curious about Yogiri's strength, especially when he saw Euphemia, who was very worried about him, even though Len was none other than a sage. The scene then changes to show Yogiri and Danora. At that time, Danora asks whether Yogiri can repeat the Tachibana case. However, Yogiri explained that this time, it was different from Tachibana's previous attitude, so it would probably be difficult to do, and therefore what he could do was kill everyone who at that time intended to kill him.
橘の時とはちょっと違う。死ね。死ね。死ね。こんな感じのことは前試されてるみたいだ。 どうにでもできるんだけど試してくる奴はいた。
At that time, Yogiri felt very annoyed because he knew that his enemy was testing his strength, even though in fact Yogiri's strength had no limits. Seeing Ryota, who was very sad at that time, Yogiri advised Ryota to move from that place. On the other hand, a dark shadow could be seen which was starting to approach the city of Hanabusa. Len even intends to test Yogiri's strength through a dark shadow that he himself cannot defeat. Len also divides his consciousness into two, which means that if Len's real body burns or his body disappears, he can restore his body with his clone. At that time, Len also ordered his clones to increase their numbers. At Yogiri's place, he began to realize that there was a very big danger in that place, and at that time a dark aggressor arrived at that place. Seeing this, Yogiri and the others were very surprised. On the other hand, Len was seen who at that time ordered all his clones to move immediately. When he saw the dark shadow, he either died or was still acting as usual. On the other hand, actually Yogiri could have killed the shadow, but for some reason Yogiri felt there was something strange in that place. However, because there was no other choice, in the end Yogiri killed the dark shadow. And sure enough, suddenly the oddity that Yogiri felt was true, and at that time a meteor continued to fall in that place, possibly none other than a clone of the sage Len. Yogiri, who saw this, panicked and asked everyone who was there to immediately lower his head. Yogiri was so panicked at that time that he hugged Danora because he was afraid that something would happen to her. Ryuta, who saw the intimacy between the two of them, was immediately annoyed and asked Yogiri to immediately stop all this chaos.
死ね。暗闇を殺した。
何？高藤くん。もう大丈夫だし。
ハリウッド映画よろしく抱き合ってな。しろって言われてもな。
And strangely, the only person who can see the figure behind the red laser is Danora. Danora also mentioned the characteristics of Len, which made Ryuta really surprised at that time. At that time, Yogiri couldn't kill Len because he wasn't targeting him. But Ryuta, who heard that, asked Yogiri if Len was targeting Yogiri if he could kill him. And because of that, the plan was immediately carried out by the three of them. At that time, Ryuta told Yuri everything about the attack pattern of the sage Len, and after that they acted together. Meanwhile, Len was confident in his abilities at that time, but it turned out that something was not in line with Len's wishes. Suddenly, Len's figure was seen falling towards Yogiri, and Yogiri asked him to die. At that time, Mokomoko immediately created a barrier in that place to prevent attacks from the remaining sage Len. It turned out that the barrier created by Mokomoko was a gift from the previous aggressor. On the other hand, we are starting to be shown all of Len's clones, which at that time died instantly in that place. At that time, Len was also very surprised because his immortal army could die because it was made by Yogiri. When Len wanted to try something else, he suddenly felt strange because his main body in Len's dimension had died. And because of that, Len immediately fell there. But before Len got to the bottom, he said that this was his goal. He wanted to save the girl. And after that, Len's figure immediately disappeared in that place. However, after the figure disappeared, we were then shown a woman who opened her eyes, although we were not told whether it was Len or not.
不死身の吸血鬼がこれは一体プレートから作られたゆえには少しずつ設すべきではなかったのです次元にいる本体がレイ様
The scene then shifts, showing the little girl. The little girl who had just woken up wondered if she was like a vampire in this place. And at that time, when the girl took out something in her arms, a hologram of Sage Len appeared which said, if she watches this recording, it means that Sage Len's plan has succeeded. In other words, Len really died, and because of Len's death, the girl managed to live in this place. And at that time, Len explained to the girl that the girl was none other than Len herself. She was a clone created from Len's body. But even so, the girl is also said to be a different individual from Len because she did not inherit any memories about Len. Because that was the only way to avoid the power of the Yogiri, hearing that the girl was really shocked. The scene then moves to the city center. Ryuta is seen saying his thanks to Danora. But Danora says that even so, they have killed the sage Len. Fortunately, Ryo doesn't pay attention to that. After that, Yogiri and Danora left the city. Then we are shown Yogiri and Danora's friends, who at that time were practicing to face a very terrible monster that was in that place. They managed to get through everything very easily. But when a woman named Ryoko returned, she was surprised by someone named Carol who suddenly got her cell phone. And when Ryoko asked where she got it, Carol said that she took it secretly. And it turned out that Carol's goal was none other than to keep an eye on Yogiri too. Suddenly, Ryoko was shocked by the notification on her cell phone that the first gate had opened, and episode 4 ends here. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you up to date with our latest content. See you in the next video.